Welcome back to another episode here, not at Kibby Tech. We're at No Limit Enterprises. We're going to show you some of Mike's Raptors, the gray Raptor that you've seen before, and then we're going to show you a little bit of the Raptor R. We're not going to talk about this thing because that thing's scary. So here we got a brand new Raptor R. It's got our billet upper arms on it. It's got our billet sway bar lengths. It's got the Innovate wheels, the BFG Project 37-inch tires, leveling kit, and it's got our billet trailing arm kit with the adjustable panhard bar. And we did everything in raw, like raw wheels, raw, all of our suspension parts in raw. You can tell it's kind of like his thing, like kind of flat black and, you know, raw machine billet. Oh, this one also has the Whipple supercharger, so it puts down like an extra 250 horsepower than it does stock, so it's super fast, but we'll show you that later. It's actually pretty slow compared to this one. If you remember this thing, we did the whole back half on it. You've seen it on our channel, but now it came back and we did the whole front suspension kit. I blew up the motor, racing it on this versus that on Hoonigan.
That looks not clear.
That's not good.
That looks not clear.
Engine right there.
Oh.
So we put a new motor in it. At that same time, we rebuilt the transfer case, front diff, and basically just redid everything from the firewall forward is pretty much new. We'll pull this thing out and we'll dive into that. All right, so we're gonna dive into the details on Mike's 2018 Gen 2 Raptor. So it's an actual Raptor, I've gone over that before. But first thing, we'll pop the hood here. And you can see there's a big giant billet crossbar there we did to tie in our engine cage. Obviously the first thing stands out, big turbos up here. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on up here. We redid a lot of stuff and just changed a lot of things up here because we also added our swing set steering. So these trucks have electronic steering racks, so we had to add the power steering pump to the engine. And I've never worked on a Ford engine ever, so we had to do a lot of custom bracketry and all this stuff just to get a power steering pump on this engine. So we got the power steering pump down low on the passenger's driver's side, which you're not even, like, I could barely see it right now, so you're probably not gonna be able to even get a shot of that. But power steering pump down there. We relocated the ABS module and we actually left all that intact. So there's like basically no lights on the dash on this thing. So everything's pretty much intact like a normal truck. Remote start works. Everything works like a normal stock truck, but it's got all this work done to it. So obviously fuel system, we redid all the fuel system because after sitting, that E85 just pretty much just toasted every single line on this thing. So every time we'd fire it up, you fix one line, make a new one, and then the next one would start leaking. So I basically went through and redid the whole fuel system while we were at it. So the engine, I'm not sure where the engine got built. Like I said, I don't know anything about these Ford motors, but this motor does have like a forged bottom end. So this motor is built for boost, and I think the guy said it's good for 1,500, 1,600 horsepower or something like that, or maybe more, because this thing puts like 1,200 at the tires. So you got to think that this thing's well over 15 at the crank. A lot of power, way more power that you can even really use in the desert. We got some paddles made for this thing and we're going to take it to Glamis. You can never have enough horsepower in Glamis, especially with paddle tires and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, power steering pump over here, and then we actually moved the alternator to the passenger side, and it's actually on a bracket mounted backwards. So you can kind of see it, kind of can't see it, right here on this bracket mounted backwards. And then we had to remount this little electric like water pump thing right here. Had to redo all the AC lines. You can see all these lines got welds and stuff on them, so we had to like redo all that stuff. The engine cage was a little tricky because the turbos and the wastegates and all that stuff are kind of right where we wanted our shock mounts, so we had to move some things around and shift a couple things. And we took a little bit of like caster out of this front end, moved the upper arm mounts a little bit forward, like literally about like a half an inch, so it's not that much. But it was just enough so we can clear the AR mounts on the wastegates on this side. This side's plenty of room because motors are offset to the passenger side factory, so this side had plenty of room. You could see the bump stops tucked all the way up in here. So big 2.5 king bump hitting off the upper arm. You can see there's quite a bit of room from ride height to bump. So basically when it bottoms out the front, it like tucks a little bit into the fender here, so good amount of up travel, good amount of droop. I think we strapped this one at I think it was 16. So usually we get more out of this front suspension kit, but with the turbos and everything we had to work around, we had to sacrifice a little bit of up travel but it still gets a ton of up travel where like the tire, like that full lock is like a 1/4 inch off the headlight. So tons of up travel with even with the 39s. But yeah, tons of work up here. We re-plumbed and rewired and redid everything. Basically had the whole motor trans out of it. The whole front of basically this thing was off. Then if you look down here, obviously it's got our bumper we made, and then a little one-off skid plate with some mesh in there. And this truck, you notice it's all like raw aluminum parts everywhere. So we left the skid plate raw. We hand grained it directionally, front to back, just so it would kind of match everything else. And we made these little side fillers, powder coated those black. If you notice the cross members, those are our heavy duty 4130 TIG welded cross members. The front cross member actually houses the steering swingers. So it's got our full billet swing set steering kit. The whole center link is billet. The swingers are billet. The pitman arm is billet. Basically everything is billet. And the whole front end, you notice a big billet spindle, billet tie rod, billet upper. So the only fabricated part of the suspension is the lower arm. So lower arm's all 4130 TIG welded. Yeah, and then we kept the same theme with the shocks. So it's got a 2.5 and a 3.5 king shock in there. So it's a 2.5 by 10 coilover, and then it's an IVP coilover too. So we got a little more dampening and adjustment there. And then it's got a 3.5 5-tube bypass, and then the 2.5 bump off the upper, and RCV axles as well. So yeah, we cut all the cross members off, cut all the AR mounts off. Everything is built from scratch. So basically we just have like the 2 frame rails out the front, and then we do our cross members. We cap the frame, we plate everything, plate the side of the frame, get rid of all the excess holes that are in the stock frames, get rid of all that stuff because cracks will want to form from those. If you notice, like our side plates on the frame, they're pretty flat and there's no like visible welds, but we do have a lot of plug welds and rosette welds on those overlay plates. And we weld those and we smooth them back out, so then the frame just has that look of just being completely smooth. And you look closer, it's got all RPI aircraft 12 points, every suspension pivot. We redid all the brake lines basically from the front of the truck out. So from the ABS module to each wheel is all new stainless hard lines that we made. And then we did little soft loops from the lower A-arm, and then hard line on the lower arm, and another soft loop from the A-arm to the chassis. So basically what you would see on like a race truck type setup. And we even have our front sway bar assembly in here as well. So we run a really small bar on the front because the rear bar works pretty good. So we've been playing with some different ratios on the sway bars to maybe like do like a really soft setup. So we could like do a soft bar in the rear and a soft one in the front. That way, say you're going straight through like a whoop section and they're staggered, if you got a really stiff sway bar, you hit that one bump, it's going to unsettle the whole truck because of that sway bars going into action there. So with the lighter sway bars, it lets the truck work a little better in the straight line, which, we try to, learn as we go with that kind of stuff because it's, it's a lot of work to, change the bars and order a bunch of different rates and different thicknesses and stuff like that. A lot of details on the front of this. It's also got our big brake kit in the front that is a requirement with our long travel kit. So we use a Wilwood 6-piston caliper, a 14-inch rotor. We make our own rotor hat, and it's a radial mount caliper, and then it basically everything just bolts onto our spindle, and it works from there. Stock hubs in the front. I haven't had an issue with the four-wheel drive hubs, so still got the stock hubs up there with the ABS sensors all hooked up, so all that stuff works like factory. Yeah, tons of work on this thing. We got, power steering cooler tucked in right here. There's another oil cooler tucked behind the skid plate. When I blew up the old engine in it, one of the rods basically came out the side of the block and almost blew the engine pan off the bottom of the engine. So it actually hit the flange and it broke like 10 of the bolts out of the oil pan, and then just engine parts and oil were everywhere. And so that basically had to go through, we went through the whole oil system and kind of just redid everything because I didn't want to reuse the cooler or any of that stuff. So we did like a remote mount filter as well, because the stock elbow off the engine is in the way of like where the steering box and the swing set is. So there's a lot of stuff there that you got to work around, but it all works out for the better. So basically you can pull this panel off and the oil filter's right there. So it's tucked up enough to where like I'll smash that panel in. It's not going to wipe out your filter, but it's, it's tucked way up in there, and you can just take that panel off, unscrew it, and switch it out there. So yeah, lots of cool details on this thing. I'm sure on some stuff. We wanted to keep the front bumper kind of flush and low profile. So we just did like the ABS plastic, like balance style. And I like the look of it. Came over here, kind of kicked it out, and mounted it like flush with the fender here, so everything kind of matches and flows. Raw Innovate G600s with the Tech-Lite rings in raw, and then polished stainless ARP beadlock bolts. And then it's our 39-inch projects. But we didn't want to go with the tire, like say the BFG 40, which gets a lot of traction because this thing makes a lot of horsepower, and in horsepower and traction equals stroke and drivetrain parts. Basically, I had this thing in the dirt, and hopefully that video will be out soon, but a couple miles in the dirt, and it wiped out the front drive shaft. But we knew going into this that all this power and the tire size was going to be really hard on drivetrain parts. Yeah, luckily we haven't had any really big issues. The rear end started making some noise, so we actually sent that third member out to get rebuilt, and then we put a new one in it. So we actually have a third member, basically 2 third members, so we can keep rotating through them, because I don't think we're going to stop blowing those up. So right now it actually has a new Evan Weller third member in it with the Gearworks locker. So he didn't want the noise on the street like from a school. So we actually have a locker in it now. So the locker does make a little bit of noise, which is normal for a mechanical locker. So we're trying that out, and that's a lot of horsepower running through that locker. So far so good. Yeah. Maybe we'll go grab this thing around and have some fun.
You weld all this shit onto it?
Yeah.
So these are your welds and this is factory weld?
Yeah.
No, these are not fun. This is yours, this is factory?
Yeah, exactly.
Now my stock Raptor looks awful. That was sick.
All right, that wraps it up for this week's episode. As you can tell, Mike's Gen2 Raptor is a handful. It spins 39-inch tires on the street with ease. Next time we show you guys this thing, we're going to be out in the desert and having some real fun with it. So tune in, and we'll see you guys later.